I'm Eric Anderson. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, ready to walk off the job. The green light from Cal State faculty members caught in the middle of a labor dispute. What the vote means for contract negotiators.
A grim milestone this year for the number of people fleeing from war-torn nations. I'm Amitha Sharma. The global refugee crisis at the top of the agenda for a San Diego forum, and a state of emergency for California trees. One of the victims, the Torrey pines found in San Diego. Experts take a closer look at the drought's impact on forests.
You are what you eat, but does it also matter where you live? There's a new study checking out how different San Diego neighborhoods can influence health. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Finally getting closer to normal at San Diego's International Airport today. This after a 5-hour police standoff with an armed suspect in Bankers Hill disrupted dozens of flights. A handful of flights were canceled. This is a look at the flight status for arrivals and departures at Lindbergh Field. The site of the SWAT standoff was in the middle of the flight path. A gunfire exchange prompted airport authorities to suspend landings for part of the day. Those landings have all resumed. You can hear it there. Officers ducking and firing back in the middle of that standoff. A police official says a domestic violence suspect surrendered peacefully after being holed up for hours. Nearby, some neighbors were forced to shelter in place.
And you know, I was in the Foreign Service, and I was in Baghdad for 3 years, 08 to 11, and this is a lot scarier than that, I got to say, because you don't know when it's going to stop, and I have no idea how long I'm going to be trapped in here.
Susan Page's home faced the standoff site on Bankers Hill. She took these photographs, as you can see. The incident forced 3 nearby schools to go on lockdown, and streets were blocked off for the investigation. No injuries were reported. A national trend of violent attacks on college campuses touched California today. 5 UC Merced students recovering after a stabbing attack on campus. Police shot and killed the suspect. It's the second violent attack on a California campus this year. The first was a shooting at Sacramento City College. So far, there have been 24 violent attacks at colleges nationwide. It's been a year since California voters approved Proposition 47. The measure reduces some felonies to misdemeanors. In that time, the Office of San Diego District Attorney Bonnie Dumanis has processed nearly 12,500 petitions from inmates seeking reduced charges and lighter sentences. Dumanis says she still has nearly 24,000 petitions to process, and that number is growing.
Instead of focusing on treatment and alternatives, we've had to focus a lot of prosecutorial time on going through the petitions.
Supporters of the law say an estimated $94 million in savings will help the state focus on treatment and rehabilitation in the coming years. The union representing faculty for all California state universities overwhelmingly voted to authorize a strike today. Pay is the sticking point. KPBS education reporter Matt Bowler joins us from the newsroom.
There was cheering in San Jose as representatives from the California Faculty Association announced union members authorized a strike. CSU is offering faculty a 2% pay raise, and the union wants 5%. Of union members who voted, more than 94% approved the strike. Associate Professor of San Diego State, Doreen Mattingly, says faculty sacrificed a lot during the recession. San Diego has 2 CSU schools, San Diego State and Cal State San Marcos. Negotiators are awaiting the results of a fact-finding investigation now. Those will be in by the beginning of next year. That means the earliest a strike could happen is January. Matt Bowler, KPBS News.
Clear skies over San Diego today after a November storm brought down thunder, lightning, and some heavy downpours. Lindbergh Field, Mission Valley, and National City were all soaked by more than an inch of rain. Hail pelting parts of Serra Mesa overnight. The National Weather Service recorded nearly 70 lightning strikes. The bolts were blamed for They're knocking out power to more than 3,000 residents and businesses in Claremont, Linda Vista, and in the Lake Murray area. Now, some downpours were too much, too fast, and they triggered flooding. The floodwaters hit stores and shoppers at Fashion Valley. KPBS photographer Chris Maui shot these photos. Emergency officials responded to major flooding along 2 blocks of College Avenue at State Route 94. Water was up to the doors of several vehicles. National Weather Service meteorologists say the strong storm cells happened in part thanks to exceptionally warm ocean water. Forecasters say the storm is a preview of what could come this winter from El Nino conditions. City leaders used the latest storm to highlight another need for San Diego. Council members David Alvarez and Scott Sherman say they want to declare a state of emergency to help get storm channels cleared before El Nino-fueled storms arrive. There is a mix of sun and clouds, by the way, in the forecast along the coast. Look for temperatures coming up in the 70s. It'll be more autumn-like weather in the inland valleys with temperatures there in the 70s, overnight lows in the 50s. 50s for the high temperatures up in the mountains, and if you look out to the deserts, expect 70s and then getting up to 80s near Saturday. San Diego's clean tech industry slipped a bit this year. The latest national survey ranks the sector 4th among the nation's 50 largest cities. That's down from 3rd last year. The Clean Tech Survey looked at a number of different industries. They include modern, efficient buildings, renewable power, and green transportation. The study also measured patents and venture capital investment. Clean Tech San Diego President Jason Anderson says local policies also had an impact.
Global technology companies are working hand in hand with public sector companies to help advance energy and water efficiency across landmark sites like downtown San Diego, the Port of San Diego, the Chula Vista Bayfront, and the San Diego Airport.
The index finds San Diego as a top 5 city in most of the areas measured. San Diego City Councilman Todd Gloria says that affirms the city's commitment to sustainability.
You know, what sets San Diego apart from all the rest of the world is our incredible quality of life, our incredible natural resources. And when you're able to combine the innovation and business-minded nature of the clean tech companies with technologies and innovations that will help maintain what makes us so special, that's something that everyone can support.
San Diego's clean tech sector has grown from roughly 125 companies in 2007 to more than 800 firms today. A coalition of states are stepping up to defend President Barack Obama's plan to slow down climate change. California and 17 other states filed a joint motion today in favor of his plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They're opposing lawsuits filed against the Environmental Protection Agency last month. 25 states and industry groups blasted the president's carbon-cutting plan. They called it a, quote, unlawful power grab by Washington bureaucrats. Cases will be heard by the U.S. Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C. As nations around the world respond to a global refugee crisis, experts are weighing in at a forum tonight at the University of San Diego. Amitha Sharma takes a look at the challenges facing the people who are trying to escape from the violence.
A world record was broken this year, and not the kind humanity strives for. There are now more refugees than ever before, about 60 million. But few of the countries they're fleeing to are prepared, and some are rolling up the welcome mat. Joining me to talk about the crisis is Rowan Arara, PhD student in sociology at UC San Diego, and historian Keith David Wattenpaugh, author of a new book called Bread from Stones, The Middle East and the Making of Modern Humanitarianism. Keith, let's start with you. You write that the inhumanity of World War I in the Middle East basically spawned modern humanitarianism, but refugees are dying every day trying to get to safer land. How well prepared is the world to handle 60 million refugees?
Well, the world has utterly failed those 60 million refugees. Even though we have a massive bureaucracy in the form of the UNHCR, most states have refugee policies. We just haven't been able to either address the causes of refugee suffering and displacement and violence effectively, nor have we been able to create systems to effectively protect people once they seek refuge and then resettle them in Western Europe or the United States or the Western Hemisphere when they need to find a final place to find asylum. It's about 18 years from when someone declares themselves a refugee until they're eventually resettled at the moment.
Rowan, refugees from places like Afghanistan and Syria and Iraq are facing unspeakable treatment by ISIS, by the Taliban, and in some cases their own government. But when they arrive at some of the host countries in Europe and elsewhere, they're facing racism and xenophobia. What kind of emotional toll does this take on them?
That's a great question. And I think what it gets to is the fact that trauma doesn't just happen at the moment of persecution. It doesn't just happen when you are in that country and you're trying to leave. Being a refugee also means that you are experiencing trauma along the way, along the routes, either in countries of first settlement, like for many of these refugees who are going to Europe, like Jordan, Lebanon, or Turkey. And for many people, Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey is a final country that they'll stay in. And you're also getting to a point that host communities also face a lot of difficulty in taking in these refugees. And that gives us the opportunity to rethink as individuals what we can do and how we can respond to the refugee crisis, because it's not only states that affect the refugee experience, but also people.
And very quickly, how can people, individuals, respond?
Well, the first example that comes to mind is in Iceland. So when the Icelandic government said that they would take 50 individuals, over 11,000 Icelanders spoke up and said, you know what, we will house refugees in our homes. And
that's very powerful. Keith, Colin Powell famously said, if you break it, you fix it. Many of the refugees are coming from countries like Afghanistan, like Iraq, like Syria, where the U.S. and its allies have intervened. Given that, do these countries then bear more responsibility in accepting the refugees?
Well, I think the United States' biggest responsibility to help refugees is because we are a country who have helped refugees in the past. It's part of who we are as Americans to reach out to those in need across the water and help them. And in some cases, bring them here, let them become part of our society, and allow them to contribute to the diversity and the excellence of the United States. So it's less about you break it, you buy it, and more about our own responsibility and being true to our sense of American values. You know, we are a country built by refugees coming from all over the world, and we have to be true to that identity.
And Rowan, you spent some time with refugees at a Jordanian camp this summer. What was daily life like for them?
I think if I were to sum it up, it's very important to point out that people in camps are waiting. Waiting and temporariness very much characterizes many of the refugee experiences. And a lot of this comes from the fact that they can't seek higher education or a fulfilling career. People are waiting to get access to the basic resources that they need, and sometimes that's not even enough.
And in their wait, what are they doing?
They're literally waiting. People are just there in camps. You know, people who live outside of camps may be seeking partial employment. Maybe they're trying to get access to more funding or more money through unauthorized work. But in those cases, those people are also trying not to get confined by the authorities.
And Keith, very quickly, you also have spent time with Syrian refugee students. What does your research show?
Well, they want to get back to school. They want to restart their lives. I mean, they are on the verge of becoming a lost generation, which will harm both the security of the Middle East, but also it will be our failure to help them will lead to problems in their societies going forward.
And we have to close it there.
Yeah,
Keith, Rowan, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
The ongoing drought appears to be the new normal for California farmers. Agriculture industry officials say they're gearing up for another year of water-saving measures. Farmers are spending money on research that looks at ways to build a sustainable model for soil.
As we have encountered our 4 years of drought and entering into our 5th year of drought, we understand how important soil structure is and building a sustainable soil model so that we can, when we do get rain, that the soil can absorb it properly and enhance plant growth and therefore feed our growing population.
The agriculture industry is also looking at ways to recharge groundwater aquifers. Researchers at UC San Diego want to understand how different San Diego neighborhoods can influence health. KPBS science reporter David Wagner says they need people to study.
When it comes to where San Diegans live, do wealthier neighborhoods produce healthier people? Or is it more about walkability, parks, and access to good food? UC San Diego is launching the Community of Mind study to find out. The goal is to study how living and working in different areas of San Diego can influence a person's risk of developing cancer. Lead researcher Jacqueline Kerr hopes that information could help city planners build neighborhoods that promote better health.
For example, where sidewalks might need to be installed, where bike facilities, bike lanes could be positioned, where there might be need for additional services, whether those are health services, transportation services such as bus stops, or even grocery stores.
UC San Diego is recruiting people from all over San Diego County between the ages of 35 and 80. Participants will wear small motion tracking devices for 2 weeks. They'll visit a clinic and they'll report what they eat. For more information on joining the study, go to communityofmind.ucsd.edu. David Wagner, KPBS News.
The National Marine Fisheries Service is investigating the death of 2 dolphins off the coast of San Diego. They were found at Imperial Beach and Silver Strand last month. It happened after Navy ships used sonar in nearby waters. Sonar can affect marine mammals' feeding and even cause deafness or death. An analysis is underway to determine how the dolphins died. Following up on the latest state of emergency declared by Governor Jerry Brown, he's responding to the ongoing drought that has killed so many trees around California. He warns that dead trees pose a serious fire risk and it increases the danger of potential mudslides. Amita Sharma looks at the toll the drought has taken locally on one of the nation's rarest pines.
California is in the midst of a tree crisis. 22 million trees have died since the onset of the drought 4 years ago, and millions more are likely to go. San Diego's beloved Torrey pines have fallen prey to the drought too. Darren Smith, Natural Resource Program Manager with the California State Parks, is here to talk about the status of our region's trees. Darren, how have trees in San Diego County fared through the 4-year drought?
Well, I can't speak much to the rest of the county other than from driving around. You can see a lot of dead trees, especially conifers, even in people's yards and landscaping and things. But with Torrey pines, we've lost about 150 trees overall over the last 1.5 to 2 years, something like that.
But Torrey pines don't traditionally require a lot of water, so what's been the problem?
Well, you know, I think for 7 or 8 of the last 10 years, we've been far below average precipitation levels. So the trees are stressed from not having water, not only just the last few years, but for the cumulative effect. You know, the groundwater is probably much depleted. That combined with the abnormally high temperatures over the last few years has really caused a lot of water problems for the trees. So they're not able to use their primary defense mode to be able to push out bark beetles and other pests.
So you have the Torrey pines, and if they go away, albeit slowly, what other plants suffer as a result?
Well, I was going to say we don't expect Torrey pines to disappear completely. We kind of expect them to recede to sort of their better habitats. I mean, they've been around for a long time through a lot of different climatic changes, so I expect they'll hang in there. What we'll probably see, though, is you know, a lot of the other plants that are adapted to drier conditions, the succulents and some of the others probably coming into more prominence. The big fear is that if we do have these sort of weather and climate changes, that we're going to see more non-native species that cause problems. So, you know, if we didn't have non-native species, we'd just see sort of a slow adaptation of these other, you know, Southern California native plants, sort of filling in those niches. But right now we're more worried about the weeds.
Well, I didn't mean to suggest that the Torrey pines might go away, but if they diminish
right.
In their numbers, is it possible that rather than diminishing, they might actually adjust to the newer climate?
Well, I think so. I mean, that's the idea, is we're sort of working with what we're given as far as climate and weather. And we expect that probably, you know, given most climate predictions, is that we'll have fewer Torrey pine trees than we have at present. It's not the worst thing in the world. I mean, back in the late 1800s, it's estimated that we only had 200 trees in the mainland. So we're still going to be doing better than that, I think. But you know, we're going to do everything we can to protect the trees we have and make sure they still exist. I mean, they're not only important biologically, but they're very important culturally to San Diegans.
So there's this projected El Nino that's supposed to hit this year.
Right.
Even though it's 1 year, might that have an effect on the Torrey pines?
We think so. I mean, water's good for trees, especially conifers. So we're hoping that, you know, that some of that deficit over the past few years is filled, and there's enough moisture to you know, improve the vascular function of the trees, and so they can defend themselves from pests.
Does it make sense to plant more Torrey pines?
You know, at present, it's interesting because I'm getting a lot of requests to, you know, why aren't you planting more trees? And the idea is if we can find places that we're fairly sure we can have sustainable populations of trees, we're going to do that. But just going out and sort of pell-melling, you know, planting all over the place could cause more problems because you're planting in areas that the trees aren't well adapted to and could become weakened and become sources of bark beetle infestations.
So if you can't find, if the Torrey pines aren't sustainable in this new climate, at least on the scale that they have been, are there other trees that might be able to be planted to replace them?
It's interesting. I have a friend who suggested a rare bishop pine from Baja, but I don't think we'd do anything like that. I mean, the lucky thing is our coastal shrublands and chaparral and Torrey pine woodlands have a very high species diversity. We have a whole bunch of other plants that are capable of filling in those niches. So, you know, there's plenty of, you know, nature has a very good defense mechanism for changes.
And we're watching it all unfold right now.
And we are. It's a little scary, but it's also a little exciting and intriguing.
Okay, we're going to close it there. Darren Smith, thank you so much.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next News Hour, actor Jeff Daniels at home, on screen, stage, and his native Michigan. That's Wednesday on the PBS News Hour.
And before we get there, here is something for toe tappers. Music and dancing shoes helped a San Diego woman find her bliss. Ken Kramer shows us where she found it in Balboa Park.
The Balboa Park we know today began with the 1915 Panama, California Exposition. We're marking the 100th anniversary of this World's Fair by sharing your special moments and memories of Balboa Park. Michelle McDougall shared her memory of finding her passion for dance at the park 25 years ago when she was 46 years old.
My memory was of parking in the back side of the zoo parking lot and walking with my brand new tap shoes into the War Memorial Building, into a class where I had absolutely no idea what was going to happen. I was very nervous and excited, and I loved it. I loved it from the moment I learned the very first shuffle or step. It was something I should have been doing all my life, and of course the park was associated with that feeling. My girlfriends, when I was 10 and 11, took dance, and they each had zippered cases with red leather flamenco shoes and black patent leather tap shoes and pink satin toe shoes. And I would just hold those shoes and want to do that so badly, but my family simply couldn't afford it.
5, 6, 7, 8.
So I decided I was going to take dance, beginning dance, and a friend recommended this particular teacher who taught tap on Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. and I signed up.
7, 8.
That first class was 25 years ago, and I have never stopped dancing since. I've been in the program every opportunity, I've moved from beginning tap to intermediate to advanced, and now I'm in what's called the adult ensemble of San Diego Civic Dance Arts. I'm in a company, basically, and so I'm taking class here still, and we perform in the junior theater next door, but still my bliss. 25 years later, I'm still very grateful for that program. One of the most fun things I've done recently is to participate in the first ever tap flash mob here in Balboa Park. Balboa Park is special for me, not just because this is where I found dance and found that I could do it late into my life, but because of all the beautiful art museums, the zoo, the gardens, the restaurants, and I live near enough that I'm able to come here very often. If I feel sad or lonely or whatever it might be, I can come here and walk my dogs and just feel uplifted by the beauty of this park. It's a treasure. It's really, to me, one of the most beautiful spots in the city.
KPBS's Brooke Ruth produced that story. To share your Balboa Park memories and to see other memories shared with KPBS, visit kpbs.org/memories.
What a great thing to find your passion, even if it's a little later than most. Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, wildlife under attack at illegal marijuana farms, the operation that's leading to a decline in weasel populations. And on Midday Edition, the man who helped make Disney's Bambi a classic is going to be honored at San Diego's 16th Annual Asian Film Festival. That's tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website. It's kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back here again tomorrow night. Have a great evening.